As we age, the question of who to live with becomes more significant. It's a topic that has long intrigued many. In Western culture, independence is often held in high regard, leading some to choose senior living communities. Meanwhile, in Eastern traditions, there's a greater emphasis on family unity, with many believing that true happiness in old age comes from being surrounded by loved ones. However, times are changing. In today's fast-paced world, even well-meaning children can find it difficult to provide the full care their aging parents need. Generational differences in lifestyle habits can also create tension when living under the same roof. So where should we live in our later years? Let's explore some thoughtful stories that might offer clarity. 1. Living with your children, a hopeful but challenging choice. Many of us, as we age, hope to live with our children, imagining the joy of being surrounded by family. Take the example of John and Mary, who always assumed that, when the time came, they would live with one of their two sons. In fact, John's younger son, David, even chose a wife based on how well she would get along with his parents. He thought that ensuring harmony between his wife and parents would guarantee a smooth life together under one roof. However, despite their best efforts, things didn't go as smoothly as planned. Shortly after marriage, tension started to build. You see, John and Mary were used to having everyone gather for a home-cooked dinner every night. But David and his wife, busy with work and their own social lives, couldn't always meet that expectation. This made John and Mary feel neglected, leading to feelings of frustration. Then there were the inevitable generational differences. For example, Mary believed in caring for her new grandchild using the old ways, remedies passed down through the family. David's wife, on the other hand, preferred modern, scientific approaches to childcare. These differences, seemingly small at first, grew over time, creating stress and silent battles between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Over time, the friction increased. David, trying to juggle his loyalty to his parents and his new role as a husband, began to lose patience. At one point, he even spoke harshly to his father during an argument, something unthinkable in their family. This led to deep hurt and resentment, leaving both John and Mary feeling like strangers in their own home. Eventually, David and his wife decided to move out, and the family, once hopeful about living together, ended up divided. Now, not every family faces such severe challenges, but it's important to recognize that living with your children can bring both joy and strain. It requires patience, understanding, and a willingness to accept each other's differences. If that balance can be found, the rewards are great, but as we've seen, it's not always easy. 2. The rewards of living with family. Finding joy in togetherness. Living with family can bring a lot of joy and comfort, especially as we grow older. Take, for example, Robert and Susan, a couple in their 70s who live with their children and grandchildren in a close-knit, multi-generational household. They've created a beautiful balance where the older and younger generations live in harmony under one roof, each helping the other in their own ways. Robert and Susan help out by watching over their grandchildren and even taking care of some household chores. In return, their children make sure their parents are well cared for, especially when it comes to health issues or emergencies. It's a system that works because there's mutual respect and a shared understanding of each other's needs. The daily interactions between grandparents and grandchildren are also priceless. The grandchildren learn about their family's history and traditions, hearing stories about times long before they were born. And for Robert and Susan, these moments bring a sense of purpose and joy. They feel they're contributing to the family in meaningful ways, and they're passing down important values to the next generation. The family eats meals together, often gathering in the evenings for dinner, and spends quality time on weekends. The house is filled with laughter, shared memories, and a deep sense of belonging. Even on busy days, there's always a sense of warmth that comes from knowing they're all together. Living with family can also provide peace of mind, especially when it comes to health. Should anything happen, Robert and Susan are never alone. They know that if they're feeling unwell, help is always nearby. This brings a level of security and reassurance that is hard to find elsewhere. Ultimately, for Robert and Susan, the greatest gift of living with their family is the closeness and connection they share with their children and grandchildren. It brings them peace and joy to be surrounded by loved ones, knowing that they're all looking out for one another. This sense of togetherness makes the later years of their life truly fulfilling. 3. Choosing independence, the value of living on your own. For some, living independently in later life can offer the freedom and peace they seek. Take the case of Margaret and Richard, who, rather than living with their children, decided to maintain their own home well into their 70s. From the start, they were clear with their children. They valued their independence and preferred to live separately. Margaret often said that while she loved her children dearly, she didn't want to interfere in their lives or routines. She knew from her own experience that living with family can sometimes create unintended friction. Margaret and Richard found great joy in managing their own lives, surrounded by familiar neighbors and longtime friends in their community. At one point, their younger son, Michael, asked if he and his wife could move in with them for a short time while they were saving to buy a home. Margaret agreed, but with the understanding that it would be temporary. She knew that living together long-term wasn't ideal for either of them. After a few months, Michael and his wife found their own place nearby, allowing everyone to maintain their independence while staying close. Margaret and Richard believed that living on their own allowed them to retain control over their daily lives. They could come and go as they pleased, spend time with friends, and enjoy their own routines without feeling like a burden to their children. They kept active in their community, volunteering at the local library and attending church events. These connections gave them a sense of purpose and belonging, while still allowing them to keep their family relationships strong from a distance. When asked what they would do if their health declined, Margaret and Richard already had a plan. They knew that when the time came, they might need additional help, and they were prepared to hire in-home care or even consider assisted living if necessary. However, for now, their independence was something they cherished deeply, and they didn't feel the need to rely on their children full-time. For some, like Margaret and Richard, living independently is a way to preserve dignity and autonomy in their later years. They felt that by maintaining their own space, they could continue living life on their terms, all while knowing their family was nearby if they ever needed support. Before, senior living communities, finding peace in assisted living. For some, choosing to move into a senior living community or assisted living facility is a thoughtful and practical decision. Take the example of Eleanor, a widow in her early 80s. After her husband passed, Eleanor decided that maintaining her home was too much, and she didn't want to burden her children who lived far away. Instead of relying on family for constant care, Eleanor made the choice to move into a senior living community. At first, her children were surprised and even a little worried. They wondered if her decision meant they hadn't done enough for her. But Eleanor explained that this was the best choice for her. It allowed her to live comfortably and maintain a sense of independence, while also ensuring she had the care she needed. She was also clear that she didn't want to feel isolated in her home, waiting for occasional visits from her children. In the senior community, Eleanor found herself surrounded by people her own age, with whom she could share stories, hobbies, and experiences. The facility offered regular social activities, fitness classes, and group outings, all of which helped Eleanor stay active and engaged. She quickly made new friends and felt a strong sense of community that she hadn't experienced while living alone. Eleanor also appreciated the peace of mind that came with knowing she had access to medical care and assistance whenever she needed it. There were trained staff on hand to help with any health concerns, and the facility provided meals, housekeeping, and transportation services. This allowed her to focus on enjoying her days without worrying about the challenges of daily upkeep or unexpected emergencies. On special occasions and holidays, Eleanor's children would visit, and sometimes she would even spend a week or two with them. But at the end of the day, she was always happy to return to her own space, where she felt both independent and secure. For people like Eleanor, moving into a senior living community is not about losing freedom, but rather gaining peace of mind and a supportive environment. It's a way to ensure that they can continue living life with dignity and social connection, while also taking the burden off their families. As we grow older, the question of where and with whom to live becomes deeply personal and complex. There is no one-size-fits-all answer. For some, the joy of living with family, surrounded by children and grandchildren, brings comfort and fulfillment. For others, maintaining independence in their own home with the freedom to live life on their own terms is most important. And for many, moving into a senior living community provides a balance of care, companionship, and independence. What matters most is finding the arrangement that brings peace, happiness, and dignity. Whether you choose to live with family, on your own, or in a supportive community, the key is to honor your own needs and desires. These decisions should be made with careful thought, open communication, and a deep understanding of what will bring you the most contentment in your later years. Remember, there's no right or wrong way to approach this stage of life. What's right is what works best for you, ensuring you are surrounded by love, support, and a sense of purpose. Thank you for listening, and may you find peace in whichever path you choose.